Rolling.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sean Allen. I'm with two groups here, the Wanna Get Fast group, WANNAGETFAST.com. That's with Chris Corfist and Dan Fichter from Slow Guy Speed School and Wanna Get Fast. And these guys are personal trainers and athletic trainers and coaches with some of the fastest people in the country here, and they train a lot of these fellas off of some of the referrals from our patients and vice versa. But they've got a great website with a lot of blogs, a lot of information and articles, and a lot of the DVDs that we have co-authored and put together. You can also find them on our website, Homunculus Group, HOMUNCULUS group.com, where you can find some of our free podcasts. All of these are linked between Wanna Get Fast and our site. So if you want to find some of these videos and DVDs, you can certainly find them there. The blogs and podcasts are free, and so are the articles. The DVDs kind of coalesce a lot of the material and some of the athletes and videos that we've put together and allow you to take the information, put it all together, and figure out how to use it for your patients, for your clients, for your athletes, and whatnot. So today we're going to talk about the Forefoot Vulgus foot type. In previous podcasts and webcasts, we've gone over the Forefoot Varus. We've gone over the rear foot varus, where the rear foot is tipped a little more into this position as opposed to neutral. It's tipped outwards. Today we're going to talk about the forefoot valgus. So if this was forefoot varus, where the forefoot plane is in this position, forefoot valgus is the opposite. Okay, this is actually the most common forefoot anomaly that's out there, and the reason is because it's suited and fitted very well with the rear foot varus. So rear foot varus is quite frequently found with forefoot valgus, and here's why. It's very simple, actually. It's typically found with a more rigid rear foot varus deformity. So when you take a normal rear foot, and that's the position of the rear foot where the forefoot and the rear foot are on the same plane. When you take a rear foot position and you make it a little more varus, you can see that you torsion the foot a little bit more. That tends to create a higher arch, or what we call a cavus foot position, or increased supinated position. These people tend to have a little bit more of a rigid foot. In this position, if the foot, when the foot is not locked on the ground, when the rear foot is twisted into a varus position, you can see that the forefoot lifts up off of the ground as well. So if I was to look at it from head-on position, if this is your neutral position, if I take the rear foot, make this foot a little bit more rigid, and I tip the rear foot into a varus positioning, you can see that the forefoot lifts up off of the ground. The foot developmentally then goes through a torsioning through the subtalar joint, through the talar neck, where the foot tries to find its way, the medial part of the foot tries to find its way onto the ground. That creates a torsioning in this direction here, which creates a valgus positioning at the forefoot. If this is varus, that would be valgus. Okay? In this case here, you can see I've taken the valgus and I've lifted the outer part of the forefoot off of the ground. That brought the rear foot back into a neutral position. So if this is neutral, everything is square. If I go rear foot varus, I lift this forefoot off of the ground. If I bring the forefoot to the ground in a forefoot valgus positioning, the rear foot corrects. So in other words, what I'm saying is this forefoot has gone through a torsioning positioning here, and it's done that in order to bring both the rear foot, the lateral and medial calcaneal tubercles, back onto the ground with the forefoot onto the ground. In order to have these 2 points and these 2 points both on the same plane, the foot had to go through a torsioning position. Okay? When that torsioning doesn't occur, you do not get a forefoot valgus positioning. You get more of just a regular forefoot positioning. Okay, or forefoot varus positioning. So this is, like I said, it's found very frequently with a more rigid rear foot. It's the most common forefoot deformity. We showed you the demonstration of how this torsioning occurs. One of the problems is that these people tend to spend more time on the outside of the foot. If the rear foot is varus positioned and the forefoot had to go through valgus to find equal forefoot symmetry on that plane, the tibia is more on an angle here. These guys typically also have a bowed tibia positioning as well. Okay, anytime you have a rear foot varus positioning, you will see a tibia bowed. Okay, that tends to put a lot of load on the knee. On the medial side, the medial joint will collapse, the outer part will attenuate. There you've got kind of a bowing position of the tibia there. It's also caused or seen with a genu varum position. Okay, Genuvalgum would be more of a knock-kneed position. This is a genuvarum position. It can create some maceration of the menisci. This type of a foot can also create some abnormal spin through the tibia, abnormal spin through the talus, and also through the hip. So you need to look at the entire kinetic chain in these clients, both hip positioning, pelvis positioning, tibia, and whatnot. They will have some tibial internal rotation, typically, to try and get that foot onto the ground. Okay. Some of the etiology issues with this, although it's not really all that important, but they thought that the calcaneal cuboid joint right here, between the calcaneus and the cuboid, which is one of the mid-tarsal bones, they thought that this joint wouldn't lock appropriately. So as you would come across the ground and put your forefoot on the ground, this joint was supposed to lock. When this joint locked, it would push you onto this position here. They thought that this was a congenital malformation of the joint. It didn't close pack or lock appropriately, and so the foot wasn't allowed to spin in its normal positioning or normal time frame in order to get the forefoot on the ground in a neutral position. Another one of the etiologies was that the talar neck over-rotated, and so the normal talus would have to spin or torsion in order to bring this first met down on the ground. Those etiologies are not important. Basically what we've come up to in the research at this point is that you're dealing with a more rigid rear foot, and that this forefoot is nothing more than a compensation of twisting to try and find that first toe onto the ground. Okay. There are certainly going to be abnormal mechanics with this. You're going to see weak, short flexors. You're going to see a pinky toe that wants to kind of curl up underneath the other toes here. You're going to see a slightly wider forefoot typically, and you're going to see some weakness of this lateral column. These people are going to be more vulnerable to ankle inversion sprains. At least that's what we see clinically. And so that is our forefoot valgus presentation.